And hello, folks. Welcome to Totally Tanked. Oh, what episode is this, Rob? 59.
The tankiest podcast in Tankville. It's June 15th, 2024, and this is episode 59. I'm John, and I'm Rob. We're out of whack there, but and joined by...
Hello, I'm John. And hope you're enjoying... So Jamie Stokes, long-term listener from South Australia. Welcome to the show, Jamie. Tasman's on the line. Antonio from Ottawa was on earlier. Hopefully he's still there.
Hopefully he's still hanging around for us.
Yeah.
And look, let us know if the images, sound and everything else quality is up, down, bad, sideways, whatever, because I'm sure John's come up with a new wonderful piece of technology that he's introduced to the mix, and it's all fun and games. Now, am I going to be qualified to drive this thing anymore?
Hey, there you go. Yes, so Rob had a little joke in there that we are the Tanktainment answer to Wayne's World.
That was your joke.
Yeah, it's an oldie but a goodie. I thought I'd taken it out. Anyway. Okay, Rob, what tank are we doing today?
The oft-requested Romanian TR-85.
Surprisingly oft-requested, but yes.
That's right. The tank that some people call the worst modern tank in the world, the worst tank in NATO, a modern Western T-55.
Which is definitely not.
A tank that should have been retired, and why haven't you bought the Leopard 2A5 yet, you silly country? And no, we're not talking about the New Holland TR-85 Combine Harvester. I've got the ride-on Combine Harvester. That's a song.
Ooh, that is a song. Okay, what is it that we do in this moment of the show, though, Rob?
We thank our wonderful patrons.
We do, and let's see if it all works. Look at that. Boom.
Here comes our artificers.
Look at that. Yeah, but our sound is still coming through. Yes, so who have we got? Brian Jenkins, Chris Pezet, Cornelius Weber, Ian McGuinness, Jonathan Markle, Maxi Mixed, Pear, and in our other tier, we have Anton Gerbanov, Carter Heller, Christoph Keller, Dan Sapienza, David Mulvaney, Floaty Burb, Guy Hook, Hans Wang, Henry Hemerd, Jay Beckman Strauss, Jamie Stokes, Late Apex, Major Mansfield, Scotch 12, Spencer Davis, Steve Matthews, Tony L, and Vikram Murthy. So that is the patrons. Let's bring us back into the mix. Look at that.
Thanks, folks.
Isn't that? It's nice when it all works. Cool, and we're all wearing our Totally Tanked shirts. This is the Tanks Are Always Political series that I'm wearing, and Rob's got one of our very first shirts, the Sherman there.
And you can get those shirts on redbubble.com along with coffee mugs, coasters, hats, and any sort of other thing you want to stick on your head. And to the fella at the bakery who keeps seeing the T-shirt and keeps asking about the podcast, I hope you found us, and this will be a bit of an adventure for you. But
and,
now,
hope you like it as well, and don't poison Rob's baked goods.
I don't get them as my child gets them when we take her shopping. Anyway, time to get into the tank. All right.
Yep.
So TR-85. Do you know what well, we'll get into that. Anyway, in service from 1986 to present. So, it's only been involved in the Romanian Revolution of 1989.
Now, there was a number, about 150 that the Iraqis had.
Well, we'll get into those, yeah. So but they weren't the TR-85s. All right, so it was designed from 1978 to 1986, manufactured at the Romanian mechanical factory in Bucharest.
Now, Roman is basically, it's a consolidation of all of Romania's military industrial complex. And it's got quite a lot of separate facilities that view each other quite separately, but Romam is now everything. And it's worth noting that before the fall of the Iron Curtain, Romania was the world's 10th biggest arms exporter, although very much selling, one would say, dodgy knockoffs to countries that couldn't afford anything better.
I think they get the line in Pentagon Wars of...
that's right, they were using the Romanian RPGs
yes.
to not penetrate the Bradleys.
Yes, yes, that was the big thing, was the dodgy Romanian RPGs. Anyway... produced from 1986 to 1990, they built 617 variants. So you have the TR-85, the TR-85 M1,
the Bison, which is what we kind of named this episode after.
Yep. The TR-85 M1R, the DMT-85, which is the engineering vehicle. DMT-85 M1, with a possibility we might see a TR-85 M2 or 3 in various books and notes around the places. We'll get into those a bit later. Mass of 50 tons.
which I think is going to be important when we get further into this, because they have kept it. They've been willing to accept a tank with a lot of inferior specs to keep the weight down, also limited by the engines available to them, which is quite a saga.
Considering the T-55 was 38 tons, it's a bit of a chunky beast compared to that, which is what it's based upon. It's not a T-55, but it is based upon that.
Now we've got a Jay Bowser who's joined us from Chattanooga.
Wow.
That's where the choo-choos come from. Okay.
Welcome, Jay Bowser. All right. 9.92 metres long, 3.4 metres wide, 2.38 metres high. So pretty standard T-55 style. Crew vehicle, except it's a little bit longer. Crew of 4, so commander, driver, gunner, and loader.
Which for a tank built in the Warsaw Pact era was quite unusual in its day to keep the loader and not have an autoloader.
Yep. Turret armour, 320 mils of rolled homogeneous armour plus an extra 20 mils of add-on composite armour, with a hull armour of 200 mils, including some composite armour there. Well, actually, no, so that's just rolled homogeneous. So we'll get on to where the composites armour sits around the place.
It does have some a silly little bra on the front of the turret.
Yep.
Well, it looks silly. It probably does represent coverage of the most critical points to protect, but it's quite minimal.
Yep. Yeah. Main armament is a 100 mil gun. So, and it's called an A308, which is a Romanian design. They carry 41 rounds in the tank. So, 100 mil gun, not even a 105. So this is really based upon the T-55.
Well, T-55 was a 90 mil, I thought.
No,
so it's
100.
Anyway, and a rifled gun at that.
Yeah, rifled gun.
This almost takes out of modern tank capability. The gun's so small.
Yeah.
Definitely not for fighting other tanks, which we'll get.
Secondary armament, it's got the 7.62 PKT machine gun in coax and 12.7 DHK ACAC machine gun on a pintle mount on the turret.
A very exposed pintle mount.
Oh yeah,
very exposed.
I mean the hatch. I'm assuming the hatch cover rotates or something, because the commander's hatch cover, like most Russian tanks, opens to the front, and so he can hide behind his hatch cover. But the loader's hatch cover, all the photos I've seen, opens to the rear, and he's the one with the pintle mount on the machine gun. So good luck to him. Wouldn't be fun. Since joining NATO, they've added smoke launchers, grenade launchers, flare launchers, and all sorts of other fun stuff. They've now got a 8-cylinder turbocharged diesel 860 horsepower engine, and hydromechanic forward gears to reverse gears transmission, with lots of torsion bars sticking through the 6 road wheels. 6 road wheels, John, count them.
Yep, it's 6, which is why it's definitely not just a modernised T-55.
No, it's definitely not modernised, but it's still based upon. It's got a lot of features of the T-55.
Yeah, they said, hey, here's a really good tank. Let's move forward.
Here's a really good tank from 30,
but when they started the development process, it was
20-something years ago. Let's just keep going with that. All right. Operational range, about 400 Ks. Maximum...
Can carry significant external stowage to extend that.
Oh, the old external fuel drums, maximum speed of 60 Ks an hour.
That's definitely not uphill, though.
No, but it is quite zippy in forward and reverse, but not too quick at top speed. So it doesn't have those low speeds of the T-72s and type thing, or reverse. For its reverse speeds, it's actually quite quick on the reverse, so they haven't done too badly with that. Now, fun part. A very quick, simple, and basic history of Romania.
Which is funny, because we are going to have a Romanian on the show for the halftime telling us about modern Romanian history, but Rob's going to give us the Romanian background. Okay.
Yeah, all right. So,
Madeline, if you're watching, we hope we don't get anything too wrong. Cool.
And have we said hello to Alan? Alan's now joined us.
Yeah.
All right.
And a hello to Tasman. We just, we're not neglecting you, mate.
Yes. Ever wonder why it's called Romania? Well, it's because of the Romans. What have they ever done for us? Romanus go home, etc. When they settled there in 46 AD, and they called it, it was part of the Dacian area.
I think by settled you mean conquered.
Yes.
The Dacian Wars were quite a big deal.
Yes. But they left around 270 AD when the neighbouring tribes, the Goths, the Carpians, proved too much for the local legions.
Again, more that they ran the silver mines dry, and their reason to stay there disappeared with the silver mines. But yeah.
However, they left, but they maintained forts on the lower Danube for the next 400 years or so. And there had been enough local settlement and intermarriage of the Romans that Latin remained the lingua franca of the area. The oldest existing mention of the name Romania is from the 13th century. It was a Christian nation that provided a crossroads to other places that was overrun by various hordes, as I say, the Goths, the Huns, the Avars, the Mongols, and then surrounded by powerful empires all around it, by the Byzantines, the Ottomans, the Russians, the Austro-Hungarians, etc. But with a large mountain range and forests curving through the landscape, it was very difficult to control and occupy completely.
And where you haven't got the Carpathian Mountains...
There's a good map for it right there.
Yeah, it was up there. It's gone.
Yep.
There was the Danube River Delta as well, and this tank is actually, I believe, very heavily shaped by that geography, where you're either dealing with river crossings or you're dealing with mountains, and not a lot in between.
Yep. Home to Vlad Dracul, the father of Vlad the Impaler in the 15th century. The modern state was formed after the Treaty of Paris in 1856, with the nation taking the name Romania in 1862, but it didn't gain full independence until 1881. During World War I, Romania started neutral, but went to war against the Central Powers when promised Austro-Hungarian lands by the Entente. That's the Brits, the French type thing. However, it did not go well for them, with most of the country being occupied within 5 months. After the Russian Revolution and the Russians pulled out of the Eastern Front, Romania was left on its own and forced to sign a harsh treaty with the Central Powers in May of 1918. King Ferdinand... Sorry for driving. King Ferdinand mobilised the army to restart the war on the 10th of November 1918. It seemed to go pretty well for him, as the Central Powers surrendered the next day. So that's a pretty good outcome for him, I think. Then we skip forward to prior to World War II. King Carol II had dissolved Parliament to stop the damn communists from taking power, basically getting voted in and basically stopping anybody from wanting too much, and basically sold himself as a bit of a dictator. And he saw that France and the UK were not going to defend Romanian interests after giving away Czechoslovakia to Hitler, so he signed a treaty with Hitler to provide oil and food. What do you need oil and food for? Conquest. But the Nazis...
But it does go to show how damaging failing to defend Czechoslovakia was, because it just showed that there was no Allied power projection in that part of the world.
All right. But the Nazis did nothing to help when the Soviets demanded and then took parts of northern Romania, and whilst other Nazi allies, the Hungary and Bulgaria, took a few other bits and pieces of Romania, forcing the king to abdicate in September 1940. The takeaway is, don't trust narcissistic sociopaths or their apologists to help you, as true today as it was then. The new leaders...
Or I think there's a psalm saying, put not your trust in princes, but yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, the new leaders signed on with Hitler, and then in August 44, they changed sides to the Red Army when they started coming through. After the war, elections were held with 70% of the vote going to the communists, and the king was forced to abdicate.
I mean, that's quite... Communists normally win their votes by 99.9%. That seems like a fairer vote than usual, but, you know.
All right, in 1965, a young Nicolae Ceausescu, however you want to pronounce that, was appointed leader, seen as a compromise between the various communist factions at the time. He had, prior to the war, he'd been an apprentice shoemaker who then spent the war in prison for spreading communism. He moved Romania out from under Soviet control while still being part of the Warsaw Pact, and conducted his own independent foreign policy with the world. He controlled the country with dictatorial authority and secret police, forcing large ideological reforms until the 1989 revolution, when he and his wife Elena were captured trying to flee, given a short military trial, and shot. After the death of Ceausescu, other communist leaders in Romania maintained power, but opened elections and set itself up to join NATO and the EU. The economy and standard of living grew, even whilst issues of corruption continued, and young people moved to other parts of Europe. They've got a population presently of 19 million, with possibly another 3 million living overseas. In other countries. Supposedly there's a large population in Australia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hey, guys.
Yeah. Other notes of Romanian history. Nicolae Ceausescu visited Canberra, where we are here in Australia, in April 1988, so to see Prime Minister Bob Hawke. So John Lane...
Bicentenary.
Yep. Just before the opening of new Parliament House and after the bicentennial celebration. So you missed a few of them, but you got there. And so we missed our chance to say g'day. And yes, for our overseas listeners, Australians do actually say g'day.
It's just a contraction of good day. It's not that special. Anyway, let's go.
Supposedly a military coup was planned against him in October 1984, but failed when the unit assigned to carry out the plan was sent to harvest maize instead. That's a good way of stopping
Keep rotating the troops. Yeah.
In 2015, the Romanian government was brought down by corruption protests after a heavy metal band died in a concert fire in Bucharest. Have you seen that one? So basically there was corruption and the building codes, and this popular heavy metal band died, and then people took to the streets and the government resigned. So there you go. Music has power.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so now getting into the design history of the tank, which is what you all came for. Here we go. So Romania had T-55s from the Soviets, but they were not given a license to build them, and this is going to be a bit of a recurring theme. So then after Ceausescu spoke out about the Prague Spring invasion in 1968, he set the country firmly on the way to doing things themselves. And this is something that in the West we generally just viewed the Iron Curtain commies.
Yeah, they were a monolith.
Yeah, and didn't pay much attention to the individual local politics at all. And that's probably a mistake, and to some extent it continues to this day. So they started with improving their stocks of T-55s by installing first Czech and then Romanian improved fire control systems. And these are referred to as T-55AMs. But the real step was to begin the development of their own tanks, starting with the TR-580 in 1974, which would then lead into the TR-85.
So the stats for the TR-580, aka the TR-77, the TR-77-580, or the TR-800.
And for those who haven't got it yet, TR just stands for Tank Romanian.
Romansk. Yes, but yes, we'll get it's there later on. Okay. Anyway, or in the West, they're also called the M1977 or the M77. This tank was in service from 1980 to 1991. There are possibilities that there are still them running around, but unlikely. Conflicts, they were in, as mentioned before, there were 1 to 200 of them sold to Iraq via Egypt between 1982 and 1984, and those ones would have been involved in some conflicts, and we'll get down to those.
It's terrifying to think, if you're an Iraqi tank maintainer, to be told, there's some things that look a bit like T-55s, but they're not, and they've got a totally different logistics train and manuals that are in Romanian. I don't imagine they were very popular or in frontline units. But
all right, they were designed from 1974 to 1976. They produced them from 1976 to 1980. They built 405 of them. They only weighed 46 tons, so slightly shorter, same height, width and height. Again, crew of 4. Turret armour was 340 mils, so again, the same dimensions as the TR-85. But the point to note there is that they had increased the turret and front hull armour compared to, they basically doubled to what the T-55s had. And they also added 20mm side skirts.
The side skirts are quite a feature of the TR-85, and to the point that when you see photos of it without them, it's quite, no skirts.
Where we're at, main armament, they introduced a 100mm A407 Romanian gun, then they changed that to the A308 Romanian. So it's stuck with the same armaments of the PKT and the Dish-K ACAC gun. It started out with a V55 turbo diesel, 580 horsepower, same transmission and suspension, four forward gears, 2 reverse.
Now the V55, and this is going to be important when we get to the TR-85, that's pretty much the Russian Kharkiv V2 that powered the T-34.
And we've got a few other people joining us. I was only doing my job. Thanks for joining us. And DJ Malvaney. All right, operational range 380 km, slightly shorter, maximum speed of 50 km an hour, so it's a bit slower than the TR-85. All right, TR-580 kept the turret shape and gun of the T-55 whilst increasing or doubling the frontal armour and the hull.
I suspect when people accuse the TR-85 of being a modernised T-55, they're thinking of the TR-580.
They both still have similar characteristics.
The 580 was much more a modernised T-55, whereas the TR-85 is more its own tank.
Yeah, as I said before, they installed the Romanian 100mm A407 anti-tank gun instead of the D10 of the T-55. They lengthened the hull and added. This was where they first had the 6 smaller road wheels, as opposed to the 5 larger T-55 road wheels. The lengthened engine bay was designed for a West German Leopard 1 engine.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, the West Germans didn't want to sell their engines to a Warsaw Pact country.
Can you imagine the Romanians in their little minds being, we are an independent country, no longer under the control of the Kremlin. Hello, West Germans, can we have the engines for your tanks for our own tank program? And the West Germans being like, no way in hell!
Yes, that would be a little bit funny. So anyway, but they still built it. They still had a lengthened engine bay for it. So instead, they installed the 580 T-55 engine from the T-55.
Which, let's remember, is basically the same engine that was in the T-34.
T-34, yes.
Yeah, which entered service in 1940.
Yeah. Anyway, this is...
it was the best tank engine in the world in 1940, I'll give you that.
But it was... this is providing the name of the tank, and yes, the TR stands for Tank Romansk, for those wondering. Modifications to the design of the TR-580 led it to becoming the TR-77, with more Romanian-built improvements added to the tank. Moving to the A308 100mm gun. So again, they're keeping 100mm gun. You'd think if they ever think about the L7? Everybody else was.
I mean, the Chinese managed to license the L7, so I don't know why the Romanians.
And they were getting plenty of stuff from the Chinese. I mean,
I wonder if, and let's face it, ammunition stocks have driven strange tank decisions in many countries, including the British, until quite recently. So it could just be the stocks of 100mm rifled ammo what made them want to stay on that.
Wondering who's, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But anyway, lengthening the turret the rear of the turret for more stowage. They still couldn't get the Leopard 1 engine, but managed to design a Romanian 800 horsepower diesel engine version from details obtained via espionage and reverse engineering of the Leopard 1 engine. So a bit of James Bond action as people meeting in dark alleyways at night with microfiche. I'm sure there was microfiche involved.
Yeah, I mean, 800 horsepower is still in modern tank standards
low,
but it's good that they got there, and it certainly lets them take the tank up to the 50-ton mark without too much trouble. But it's certainly, the engine seems to have been quite a saga for them, and it stemming from they looked at the Leopard 1 and said, that is the sort of tank we want, and we want to build. And I think that's partly why the armour is on the low side. The guns are slightly
it's far more armour than the Leopard 1, though.
It does. It has more armour than the Leopard 1. It's slower, though, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But, all right. So, and the distinction between the versions can be seen in the space in the road wheels, with the TR-77 having obvious gaps between the first two wheels, concentrating the load bearing four wheels under the engine bay. So whenever you see it, you see a nice big gap between wheels 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, then that's the TR-77 rather than the 580. Of the 405 built, between 100 and 200 were sold to Iraq via Egypt in between 1982 and 1984, and they would have been used in the Iran-Iraq War, Gulf War I in 91, and possibly Gulf War II. Their resemblance to the many T-55s in use by Iraq would mean that, in use / destroyed meant that any TR-85, 580s, 77s seen were probably not recognised. It would take somebody who was really up on their Warsaw Pact.
The American forces in that war couldn't tell the difference between British tanks and Iraqi tanks.
If it had a pancake style pot lid, then it was just a T-55. Yeah. All right. So from that, we got the TR-85, which was a newly built tank, not an upgrade of the existing chassis. So basically, they were churning them out from scratch. with 617 being produced from 1986 to 1990. It kept the A308 100mm gun, the chassis and armour of the TR-85, but installed improved fire control systems and gun stabilisation. The engine was improved to 830 horsepower. After the fall of communism, the military was significantly reduced in size and budget, and many tanks were sold as scrap. In 1994, after the new governments were installed, the decision was made to keep 300 of the TR-85s, the others being scrapped, and go through another upgrade project that would raise the tanks to a NATO standard. So 56 of the 300 were upgraded to the TR-85 M1 from 1997. This further improved the fire control systems, thermal imaging, communications, and added armour.
And I did love how they went the same way that essentially the T90 did, was saying, how do we upgrade this? Let's get some French equipment in here.
Yeah. The remaining tanks were kept at the TR-85 standard, of which 150 are still in service. So, all right. So that's what we're looking at for the development of that tank through its period of time. Now, you will have seen the wedges on the turret cheeks. Most people, did you just do something?
Yeah, I'll get it back.
All right, cool. Wedges on the turret cheeks. So they look like ERA, but actually they're composite armour blocks that can be swapped in and out as if the tank takes any damage. The modern version includes a turret bustle for half the tank's ammo storage. The other half is stored in the hull. And I'm guessing if they ever went to war, crews would only take a half loadout and say that they had fired off, used, or forgot the other half of their ammo load, because what's the point of having a safe stowage turret bustle if you're going to store half your rounds in the hull where they can still cook off? So yeah, I'll be taking 20 rounds and not worrying about the other 20. No notes that I could find simply on the gun elevation and depression, but from the photos, the elevation looks like it's got a very high elevation of the gun, so very useful. And question of, we were saying, well, who is actually making 100mm ammunition? Because it's not very often. I mean, T-55s, yes, plenty of people, they're running around and still being used, but there's not a whole lot of places buying new ones of them. So Romania, Russia, and Israel, for some reason, are still making 100mm ammunition, and the Israelis have even managed to produce an APFSDS ammo compatible with the rifled 100mm guns.
Is that a 100mm they're putting in their old Shermans or something? Or okay,
but they're making it and they're selling it, so that's right.
Okay.
All right. Now, we know the T-55 can be serviced by an illiterate peasant and will keep going even if it makes its crew miserable. So how does the TR-85 compare for reliability?
Speaking of the crew misery, what's the recommended height of a tanker?
Well, that's the next sentence, John.
Right, okay.
All right. So for that point, the crew recommended height is no taller than 1.68 metres, which, by the way, is the same height as Nicolae Ceausescu. Is that a statement or is it just a coincidence?
That's an interesting moment. They said, we need short asses for this tank. How are we defining a short ass?
I looked him up because he didn't appear very tall. So, but when those two numbers coincided, I thought, hang on a second, is there a bit of conspiracy going on there, or just the fearless leader is useful for these tanks? Anyway, so yes, being 1.68 metres is the tallest for ease of use of the tank, but no recruiting rule is actually enforced. All right, so as I was saying, its maintenance and serviceability, it started out with great many problems. They seem to have fixed it, but from the other writings on it, it doesn't seem to be as easily to look after as the TR-85 New Holland combine harvester, which has a much bigger support network than the TR-85 tank.
Yeah, and even the most proud Romanian patriot will admit that quality control was not a great feature of Romanian industry, certainly prior to the collapse of communism.
All right, so I know John's got the poll up saying, is the TR-85 the worst modern tank or makes sense for its operators? But to my mind, my question for it is, did Romania game the system to get the TR-85 accepted as a NATO tank? When they made the decision in 1994 to say, right, we're going to upgrade 56 of these to NATO standard so that we can still be part of NATO and have our forces included, were they just going through a box-ticking exercise to make sure that they met all the bare minimum requirements? Because realistically, compared to all the other tanks that are in service with NATO and have been for the last 30 years, they really don't cut the mustard. Whereas everybody else has basically said, okay, yes, we had T-72s, we had T-55s, we had T-64s, and so forth, but now we are buying Abrams, Leopards, even K2 Black Panthers. Every other country's done that except for Romania.
Okay, so here's my take on it now. And there's a problem here with expectation and reality, because TR-85 has on many occasions proved disappointing to the Romanians who were trying to make it, as so many indigenous defence projects do. Everyone's defence and it's not like American or British or German industry doesn't have absolutely catastrophic defence procurement disasters as well. But so there's a few things they want from this tank, and they want it to be able to... obviously, the fact they've kept the 100mm gun says to me that they're not building it to fight or keeping it to fight enemy tanks. It's for lighter vehicles that are trying to cross rivers or cross mountain passes. And that's where they're planning to use this to, basically keeping the Russians out is the sole focus of Romanian defence, and with good reason. And I do think that, 56 of them, there'll be a point of the line if there was a Russian assault where these would be very useful in holding the line for a short time before they got overwhelmed. There just aren't enough of them to be strategically decisive, but they are useful, and to the extent that Romania is capable of building them and building the parts for them, that's not nothing. That is still useful capability. It's a bit like for Australia in World War II. The ability to make universal carriers and 2-pounder guns meant we could at least produce a tracked vehicle that could destroy a lot of enemy vehicles.
Sentinel.
Well, Sentinel would have been useful, as we've discussed, but the main issue was, we could make carriers, we could make 2-pounders, and that was a good start. And similarly, I think TR-85 for the Romanians is in that good start category. Yeah,
but the fact that everybody else has made the effort to buy more modern tanks.
But they're all heavier tanks, and as we're seeing in Ukraine, there's significant limitations imposed by having those very heavy Western tanks. And Ukraine is the best tank country in the world, just about. Whereas Romania is
the Carpathians are not.
or the Danube River Delta.
I loved when looking at the Danube, just watching the line of it, how it forms the southwest and southern borders of Romania, and then skirts up through the middle of the country, and then forms the northern border with Ukraine. I was saying, okay, this is
that's Transnistria.
No, with Ukraine.
Ukraine as well.
With Ukraine. No, it doesn't even go near Moldova and Transnistria. Those damn Transnistrians. It's actually forms a border with Ukraine up there. So, you're right. There's very big river deltas and lots of flooding and all that sort of stuff. But they really all right. And
a couple of comments I want to address that have come in on the chat, because the reason we're going to the effort of live streaming is to get the feedback. Tasman has mentioned that there was a TR-85 defeating an Abrams on exercises.
Yep,
I definitely believe it happened.
It happened a couple of times.
Yeah, but similarly, Australian destroyers have sunk American aircraft carriers at RIMPAC. It doesn't mean that an Australian destroyer is more powerful than an American aircraft carrier. It just means in the context of an exercise, someone got lucky somewhere. And also the point of exercise is to try those things out. We've also got Chris Andrews joined us from England, which is fantastic.
And Wi-Fi
Soldier. Who's noted that Romania has pushed Abrams tanks and did a test of the K2 Panther just last week. There we go.
Well, we'll get onto those. Don't you worry.
The K2 is in the very heavy tank category, which, Romania might well buy it. I'm certainly not saying they won't, but
I mean, they've got a lot more mountains than Poland does, so it's probably a lot more like Korea. It's a lot more mountainous.
Oh, yeah, they had a Korean tank, and it will be good for Romanian conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. No, very. Anyway, so I think they really just went hard on the idea of we want to be part of the NATO club, but we're not going to. Only going to go so far as what we're going to spend money on to get into that club. And once they're in there, they get all the benefits of it. So they have modern jet fighters, the F-16s. They have NATO bases, secure-ish border near Russia.
Which they're keen to keep secure.
Yeah. And look, every year for the last however many years, the Romanian army announces that they will be buying 300 new tanks. Last year, they said they were going to buy 54 Abrams, the version 1A2. Prior to that, they were saying they were going to buy the Leopard 2 1A5s. But but after they said about the 54 Abrams, they did say they were not committing to buying the other 246 tanks as Abrams, saying that they would buy the best of whatever was available. And they said
it sounds a bit like Australia buying submarines. We keep announcing submarine purchases. We never actually buy them.
Yeah, we've got to balance the budget with America some way, don't we? Yeah. All right. So anyway, they said they were going to buy whatever was best available at a special South Korean arms demo in Romania. So they were strongly hinting that they might also like to buy some Black Panther K2s like Poland. They also keep announcing upgrades to the TR-85, the latest being the TR-85 M1R for renovated, showcased last month in May 2024, with more improvements to the fire control system, the thermal imaging for the commander and the gunner, digital comms, battlefield command and control applications. So again, they keep upgrading it, as I say, putting more stuff in there, making it heavier. Putting more capabilities on it. Variants. Besides the TR-580, the TR-77 precursors, the only other variants were 5 TR-85s, armoured recovery vehicles, and 9 DMT-85 M1 armoured engineer vehicles with crane and mine plough.
Which looks, it's in the slideshow, so it'll come up at some point. Looks quite a lot like the American armoured breaching vehicles based on the Abrams. It's got a similar sled system. Obviously, they control the pressure on the sleds for setting up mines. But, yeah.
All right. Welcome to Alexander Hodge. Thanks for joining us.
Hey.
All right. The TR-85 M2 was mentioned as trialling a 1,200 horsepower engine.
Which is where they need to be.
In 2002, but was not continued with. They even trialled a 125mm gun in the tank at some stage or another, and said, "No, that's a load of rubbish." Sorry. Yeah. So they, in fact, there was their T-72 version. I think it was called the TR-215 or something that they had to muck around with. Conflicts. The only conflict the TR-85 was involved with was the Romanian Revolution in late December 1989, with the military quickly siding with the revolutionaries. The story goes, the Minister for Defence shot himself aiming for a flesh wound, but then bled out. The rumour then got around that he'd been taken out by Ceausescu, so the army then joined the revolution.
That's a very useful rumour to spread, wasn't it?
It was, again, who knows? But supposedly the only tank-on-tank action during the revolution was when a revolutionary T-55 AM crew saw one of the few. The Romanians had only 30 T-72s, and they weren't well known. But there was the revolutionary T-55 AM crew saw this T-72 running around and fired on it, thinking it was a foreign/Soviet tank intervening in the revolution, when it wasn't. It was actually part of the revolutionary troops as well.
Did they succeed in firing on it?
They hit it with an HE first. In the rear, the crew got out, and then they hit it with a couple of heat rounds and took it out. But it made a bit of a mess. The crew got out, so so they didn't. It wasn't a total waste of blue and blue. Hang on. Go back. All right. Talking about the Romanian army, since joining NATO, Romanian troops have been deployed to Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan, but without their tanks. In fact, tactical guardsmen, welcome. Yes, he shot himself aiming for a flesh wound, but that he missed, all right. So he aimed at his foot and hit himself in the. I don't know where he was aiming for, but yeah.
I mean, you got to make it convincing.
Yeah.
You know, a shot to the foot, no one believes. Yeah. Anywho.
Yeah. The TR-85 is included in both War Thunder and World of Tanks, but not Girls und Panzer. There you go.
Disappointing.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if it's got a tank telephone. You'd think it would, but nowadays they try and rely upon the battlefield communications to do that. So there you go.
No nation on earth has successfully got their divisional comms to work with tanks and infantry, which is why you still need the phone. But good luck to them. Okay. All right, so that is the end of our primary discussion of the TR-85. We have lots to talk about in the second half because a lot's been happening in tank world while we've been gone. But we do have a chat now with Catalin, who is an actual real-life Romanian, to talk us through a little bit about modern Romania and what's going on with that. So we will now try and cut to that. So for those who are watching, this is a standalone piece of content. This is an episode about the TR-85, a Romanian tank. And to that end, we thought it might be worth actually talking to a Romanian person. And scratching my head, who do I know who's Romanian? And my occasional but very good friend when I get to see him, Catalin in Japan, part of our Japan bureau. And a man who is always great at finding the best food at a music festival. Catalin, thank you so much for joining the show.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, John.
Now, for most people, Romanian history includes a bit of Transylvania, which is only a relatively late addition to Romania, and a lot of Ceausescu and the fall of communism. And when I went and looked on the CIA fact book, it also pretty much ends with the fall of Ceausescu and then briefly mentions joined the EU, joined NATO, both of which actually seem like quite big things that possibly need a little more fleshing out. Can you tell us some more about what Romania has been up to in the nearly half century since the fall of the Berlin Wall?
Oh, absolutely. Before we get there, I will also say that Transylvania, from an administrative point of view, is a recent addition to Romania as a state. It's been there and inhabited by Romanians for many centuries before that. Some of my Hungarian audience, our Hungarian audience, will probably understand the implied joke in that. Starting going back to what's happened after 89, a lot has. In terms of, I guess, political developments, as you pointed out, the 2004 joining NATO, and the lead up to that, 2007 joining the EU, have been really landmark developments in Romania, not just politically but socially as well. So let me talk a little bit about the NATO, joining NATO, and the lead up to that. Historically, as many of you can imagine, Romania, like most of other countries in Eastern Europe, has found itself under, I guess, the influence of the greater powers around it, whether be it the Ottoman powers, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but consistently under pressure from Russia. And historically, our interactions with Russia have been not all bad at all times, in fairness, but the perception among the population, and the history of communism, and the understanding that communism happened in Romania because of Soviet Russia, have all of these collectively have left a very bitter taste and a healthy degree of apprehension towards that neighbor from the east. So um, going back now even a little bit further, and I remember speaking to my grandmother about this after the war. Um, the general population was always has always been waiting for the, so to say, the Americans to arrive, and the Americans never arrived, and instead we got what most of you know. We got communism for a healthy chunk of that century.
Well,
Um,
they had their own government, and then the Soviets kind of quietly pushed the king out and brought in the communist regime.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Rob. You know, we did have elections, if you can call them that, in '47, and that was
They're a
the period.
little bit rigged at 70% voting for communism. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So that is the background, and that is the perception, and what that was rather the perception among the population, and there was clearly a realization among the political class. I'm hesitant to call them political elite. Let's just go political class. Um, so and another distinction I should probably make is the fact that notwithstanding Romania being communist rather, it wasn't really aligned with Soviet with the communist Soviet Union. So you could say we had Romania had its own personal brand of misery, I guess. Um, but the reason I'm mentioning this is because the alignment across most parts of society in tilting to the west at the next chance we had, and that chance arrived after the 1989 revolution in December, the fall of communism. Um, so as soon as so that happened in December Christmas Day. Um, they they executed Ceausescu and his wife, and in 19 as you know as soon as 1990 hit, really, I remember I was still there. I remember there was active talk about Romania joining the Euro-Atlantic institutions, and by that NATO and EU were was what was referred to. So that happened in quick order in 2000, NATO joining in 2004. And with that came uh, clearly a much higher degree of collaboration with other NATO members on training of military training, military equipment manufacturing. Um, Romania does have a history of manufacturing military equipment. Some of it a legacy from the Soviets. Some of it homegrown. So all of that tilted to the west and started migrating towards NATO standards.
Yeah, the NATO and the US always love having another country on Russia's borders to be able to install electronic warfare and listening devices. So just like Turkey and everywhere else, it's a case of if we can find another plot of land that we can put a base on, away we go. Now,
Exactly.
do you think the violence of the '89 revolution contributed? Do you think that had any great impact upon the country? Whereas a lot of other Eastern Bloc countries are coming out of communism, it was basically a case of the communist regime just said we resign and walked out. Ceausescu decided he was going to try and suppress it, not letting anybody know that the Berlin Wall and everything else had fallen for a month before the word got out, and so there was a bit of a violent uprising. How did you feel about that?
I think it's a terrible thing what happened, and it's unnecessary that so many people died during the revolution. Um, I will I will say that there are those who believe that the revolution was staged. It was a coup. It was and the population was used effectively by those who staged the coup in giving it legitimacy. And in the process, uh, people died, which is absolutely terrible. Young students died. Everybody believed. Most people believed in it. Everybody wanted Ceausescu gone. He was absolutely hated among the population. He, his wife, and their regime. And I do believe that there was an element of manipulation from those who orchestrated the coup, and that has left uh, to this day very bitter memories uh, among parts of the population who remember or care to remember what happened in those days. Um, so that is my view of around those events. That's my perception of what's happened. But I do remember as a student going back to Romania and going back to the resting place of some of the heroes of the revolution. Some of those, I guess, the cemetery, right? It was those kids were young. And they believed in what they were doing. They believed that they had to do what they did and take to the streets and to bring down Ceausescu. So it's terrible. It really is terrible. Is what I'll say.
Now, just let's try and move the frame forward. Most countries find a huge increase in their standard of living when they join the EU. Has that carried through in Romania?
Absolutely, absolutely. So um, the I will give some very high level numbers. I think the GDP adjusted for purchasing power estimated in 2024 is about 42,000 US dollars. That is a manifold increase to what Romania had in uh, in the late 90s, manifold. And if you express it in the Romanian currency, which by the way has been quite stable in recent years, it's an even greater increase. And
Planning to go to the euro in 2029 or something like that.
yes, that is a moving target, Rob. And yeah, every time a new a new, I guess, target deadline is set, and in the lead up to that, everybody gets excited. It's I mean that's changed at least twice, um, as far as I remember. But yes, I think there's a good argument for Romania joining the euro. But to
Okay,
answer your
and
question, John, yes,
yeah,
clearly
sure.
you see a clear improvement in the standards of in the standard of living.
Great. And I guess one thing I'm really interested in, part of the TR-85, the tank this episode's covering, is Romania's efforts to replicate German diesel engines. What is the Romanian economy look like in terms of manufacturing versus agriculture these days versus, say, the end of the Cold War?
Right. So there's a big what happened unfortunately in the early 90s was a deindustrialization of the country. Um, and the argument was all the industry that Ceausescu built was inefficient. It was not up to international the standards of the time. It was overly, I guess, it was central. The result of central planning, which didn't take into consideration the market needs. So there was a process of deindustrialization, which now, fast forward to the last 10 years, there's been a realization that we do need our industry. We do have a good history there and a good base to rebuild on. So there have been efforts to reindustrialize. In terms of uh, diesel engines, what I can tell you is that it hasn't been the German manufacturers, but more the French car manufacturers who have been present even during communism, Renault specifically, and they did come back and they did modernize their manufacturing plants and expand it quite vastly. So they're doing quite well in the country, and so is Ford. Um, but yes, I will say that there's been a clear effort to reindustrialize. Um, the other agriculture is still a very important. There's
Lots of
fertile land.
plums.
Yeah.
What the highest plum producer in the world or something for some sort of special alcohol that they make?
Oh, the plums, yes, of course. That stuff is dangerous. The good stuff is really good, but everybody makes it in their backyard, so you have to be careful. And they're very generous in offering it to to visitors, so you have to be careful what you accept. But yes, that's a long-standing tradition. Yes, the tsuika is what we call it.
I guess doing a what is it, small map, big hands kind of view. You've got the Danube River running through Romania, and that's quite significant commercial channel right into the heart of Germany as well.
Right. Yeah. That forms our natural border with Bulgaria, with Serbia, and just before it flows into the Black Sea, it just goes up, goes north a little bit, and then forms a huge delta, the Danube Delta. So that's yes, there's navigation, there's trade going on the Danube, but very importantly, it does serve as um, as a gateway for trade with the immediate neighbors of Serbia. Now with Ukraine, you would have heard that the barges crossing the Danube have been transporting large amounts of that grain that can't go out through the Ukrainian port. So they cross the Danube and they get moved on land, and then from there they make their way to the Romanian Black Sea ports, and from there to the rest of the world.
Okay, that's actually something wasn't aware of. That's very interesting. Thanks for that. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about where Romania's at in how it's viewing the world? I mean, it sounds like they're pretty happy with globalization and the EU. But where do you think the future's going?
I think there there are a couple of things to mention there. If you ask, if you took a poll now, people would complain about the EU, and I think sadly that's true in many countries of the EU. People complain. They I guess we've had it good for a while. Romania has had it good. Romania, these are the probably economically the best times that in Romania's history, and then they have been so for many years. Yet many people still find reason to complain. I guess that's a national trait, and I will not comment on that. But where Romania is and where it sees itself going, that is full integration with the rest of Europe and continued integration with the rest of Europe. There's no eastward tilt. There's no desire for people to do anything other than that. Notwithstanding that, as I said, you do have pockets that are probably more vocal than the rest of the society, saying, "Oh, in criticizing the EU," and there are efforts to remind the population of all the benefits that we've had since joining the EU, and now with the war in Ukraine, there's more focus on Romania's role in defending the eastern border. And it's visible. Last time I was there was in the summer of 22, right after the invasion and the war started, and you could see patrol jets every so many minutes, clearly doing. You could tell that they were doing the rounds. So it is visible. I think a couple of months ago, Romania announced that the largest NATO base outside of Ramstein will be built in Romania, close to the Black Sea. I think it's called Kogolnicianu military base. So the political class is clearly steering the country in westward and further integration with Europe and the institutions affiliated with it.
Yeah, that's very interesting about the jets. Look, obviously, you're not a military expert per se, but I'm curious. I mean, the whole world's watching with some awe the way that Poland is buying every tank it can find, and now has one of the biggest tank fleets in the world. Is Romania tooling up in a similar way?
Yeah, where I said there have been billions allocated to modernize not so much our tank, and I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but modernizing our jet fleet. And as you said, I'm not a military expert, but Romania does have a natural defense in the Carpathian Mountains. There are
trees and mountains make very good defensive structures.
Indeed. So for us, yes, tanks are quite important, and but I think having a strong air force is probably more important. And the way, if you look at our geography, it's probably more important, I would say. But again, with a caveat, I'm not a military expert. But this is what I see. This is what I see being reported in the press.
Yeah, no, that's still very interesting. And I mean, I think Ukraine kind of wishes it had had a better air force at the start of this conflict as well. Great. Rob, have you got any other questions?
I could talk for quite a while, but I think I'll let Catalin go, and he's got a big day planned with his boys, so hopefully you'll enjoy that.
Great. So, Catalin, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think that's a really valuable insight into Romania, which sadly is little understood by the English-speaking world. But yeah, really great to have you on the show. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you, John. Good to meet you, Rob. Yes, happy to be here.
And we're back.
Hello, folks.
Hey, so I hope you enjoyed that chat.
And welcome, Alexander Vlad. Glad you can make it. Now, we haven't quite got to our beer review yet, but we are going to look at the poll and say TR-85, the worst modern tank or makes sense for its operators. Now, 85% are saying it makes sense for its operators. Yes, they have convinced you've convinced them, John.
Look, I just think that if you take in the whole of the value of the program, it's employing local people, it's building local skills and capacity, and what we are learning in this world of easily disrupted supply chains is that there is enormous value in that. I think it still contains reasonable value for the Romanian people.
I think that by ticking the minimum amount of boxes in order to be able to get the tank into NATO, Romania has been able to string the rest of the world along saying, yeah, we're going to buy some new tanks for the last 25 years and without actually having to spend that money. And so they've been able to maintain these 56. And remember, 56 TR-85 1Ms.
Yeah, very close to a token force. There are another couple of hundred of the old
150. But so the point being is that they've strung the rest of NATO along saying, we're going to buy those Leopards. Yeah, maybe we'll buy the Abrams. Or no,
K2s.
K2s, they look really good. Or maybe we'll upgrade the TR-85s to make them even better. But the point being is that they haven't. Yes, let's face it, Western tanks are very chonky, and by maintaining a T-55 variant, upgraded, modernised, whatever you want to call it, Western version of a T-55, they've been able to keep the weight down to 50 tonnes, but there are still plenty of other tanks around that weigh less, weigh as much as that, and but basically they've saved the money and been able to achieve that.
It's always funny with economizing in that way, in that if you don't have a war while you've been economizing, then success for foreign policy. And if you do have a war while you've been economizing, then disaster, very bad.
But to be able to make that option of not modernizing, they had to get into NATO first, and that was the big thing. By getting into NATO, they could then say, well, our defense problems are solved. We're part of NATO now. Article 5 says anybody shooting at us they're in trouble.
Yeah, I think the big moral of the story that we're getting back to there is that back when Ukraine agreed to give up its nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees, it should have gone for NATO membership to give up its nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Well, they weren't aligned with NATO then, though. They were still looking for.
They should have hung on to the nukes then. Certainly as the only country, one of very few countries to have given up nuclear weapons, it's not
South Africa. The other fun one.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of fiction stories written about the South Africans giving up their nukes.
There is also the old joke that the South African army and the South African police force are entirely capable of conquering Africa, but Let's stick to...
Now, we haven't got to our beer review beers, so we're going to have to finish these wonderful Victorian bitters before we get to those.
Yep, okay, all right. So we move on to, for now, the talking points we've got. The useless M1s.
Abrams, that is.
Yeah, so the
not
Abrams.
Not the TR-85 M1s. Yeah. No, they're not useless. They're not.
Well, the Bison, the Romanian Bison might actually be more useful to Ukrainians because they can recover them when they get damaged.
Yep.
Which is just the biggest thing in tank warfare is, have you got the recovery vehicles for when it breaks down or gets damaged? Can you haul the thing back?
Yep.
If you've got 80-ton donated Western behemoths, but you've only got recovery vehicles that can pick a T-64 up, then you've got a real problem, and they're going to be less combat effective.
Yeah. So the Abrams are too fat, too heavy, and not wet-proof. Not waterproof, wet-proof. And that when moisture gets into the turrets, the electrics start going bad because it's just damp and foggy and everything else. The other complaint that the Ukrainians have is not enough boom for the bang. They are too designed for tank warfare and not enough for designed for blowing up areas or buildings or anything else.
What that building complaint told me, though, was that they didn't have a high explosive shell round.
Yeah, because they're probably carrying 80% of the rounds are for tank warfare.
But it also indicates an enormous lack of training if they're firing Sabo rounds into a building repeatedly and expecting anything other than to drill a few small holes in the building.
Might be all they've got, though.
Sure, but the Ukrainian complaints about the M1 both indicate a lack of training and a lack of appropriate parts. We get back to at the start of this Ukraine war, we were saying things like, has anyone thought about the logistics? We assumed that there was some answer to, like they had some super dispatch system using the Android tablets they were all busy using to make logistics work in a way no one ever made it work before. But what we're seeing is they just said, we'll just run them until they die.
They might have had it when they had the idea of we're going to keep them concentrated and use them as a one force. But now that they've penny packed them out as ones, in fact, not even twos, 2 tanks at a time. They're 1 tank at a time. They're throwing them into an area and say, right, your job is to protect this area, and that's your area. But the logistics system isn't able to support that 1 tank and all the other 14 tanks scattered around the place.
Well, the complaint about the Challenger 2s that they've got is that, every time they need a part, they need to place an order in the UK and it takes months to arrive. So that there's almost no spare parts capacity that's made it over. And similarly, the M1 is definitely the American way of war involves air superiority, and the Ukrainians don't have that. And
yet,
we will see. the FPV drones are coming. The FPV drones are a huge thing. I still view them as a soluble problem, but you have to put the work in to solve it. Certainly, we're going to get to the new Leopard that got announced this week. That
it has been announced. That's the thing.
Yeah,
scoop. The scoop is out. The scoop is out.
Which is, it's not a Leopard 2 upgrade. It's a whole new tank. We'll get to that when we discuss it. But even there, it's talking about having a dedicated 30mm cannon just for shooting down unmanned aerial vehicles. So it's basically half a Leopard. Because the Gepard's got 2 of the 30 mils. Actually, I think that might well be the sort of place where the tank's future is going. Anyway, Rob, it's time for you to pour some beers.
All right, so our beer review beer, in honour of the Prague Spring that established Romania to be
an independent country,
an independent member
of a Czech beer in the spirit of Prague,
established in Prague. All right, now
Sour Pramen, this is God's lager. Holy fuck, Rob! You've actually done something good. I don't think you've never been able to get this in Australia. Oh my God! This is the best beer in the world.
Now, with the main Romanian brewers now being owned by Asahi, you'd think it'd be easy to get an Ursus or a Timo Ceres in Australia, as a lot of our beers are now owned by Asahi.
And the beers that aren't owned by Asahi are owned by Kirin. So, yeah,
but not in Canberra. So instead, we got the Star of Pramen. As I said, in honour of the
Prague. Star of Pramen. Forget the tanks. Look, because we've got a more fine-tuned green screen now, which has some real minuses, but we can actually see the can.
Oh, and by the way, you should all check out John's new shirt for the second half of the show. It's his Tank Destroyer emblem tank.
So that's actually the shoulder patch of the Tank Destroyer branch in World War II, and then their motto was Seek, Strike, Destroy. I've done a little bit of a mash-up to get it together in colour matched and vintage.
John is the one who designs all these, because he's very clever and very creative.
Yes.
I just come along and look
some better
handsome.
than others, but I actually think this is a really cool design. I literally had a lefty hippie chick with winged makeup come up to me in the pub the other day and say that's a really cool design. Admittedly, I didn't do the design. That's like the Tank Destroyer design people. But yeah, anyway.
There you go. Established in Prague, known for its balanced taste, 1869, the spirit of Prague. Star of Pramen.
So most Czech beer that you see in the West is Pilsner Urquell or Budvar, and they are very good lagers. There's a reason Bohemian Lager has its reputation, and they are it.
Welcome, Jamie Stokes. Yes, it is gold standard.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm glad I've disappointed you in a good way.
To be honest, it doesn't taste as good as I remember it, but
few things ever do.
The Star of Pramen of my youth, when I was a young man, when I was a young man drinking Star of Pramen in Prague, it was a very happy time.
All right. So, what can you tell us about the Star of Praman, John?
I believe something like GQ magazine once called it the beer god drinks, or the lager god drinks. It's
Brewed with passion using the finest ingredients, including premium Czech hops.
Yeah. Anyway, so we've got a great big. It's a huge can, 500 mils. Yeah.
500 mils, 5% alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, we'll keep going with that while we talk about other things happening in tank. Well,
Fat tanks.
Yep. Now we had a story in the Australian, which is a god awful rag for many reasons.
But it's the only national paper that we actually have.
Yeah, it's Murdoch owned, saying, "Oh, tanks are getting destroyed in Ukraine," and it just comes back to yes, tanks get destroyed. They are weapons, instruments of war, and destruction is part of instruments of war. That doesn't mean they're useless. It doesn't mean they're obsolete. What it does mean is active protection systems are going to become a essential part of the tank. It means they need to be able to counter drones. It means what I've been talking about for a long time, that the tank of the future is probably a node in a combat system, and possibly the forward manned node, which means you've got a whole bunch of unmanned systems out forward of it that it's controlling. And how many people you need in the tank to do all of that work is going to be interesting. I could envisage you get up to something the size of an infantry fighting vehicle with, maybe 5 or 6 technicians in the vehicle to manage all the other bits that are unmanned going ahead of it. But the fundamental thing that makes a tank work is that it can carry heavy weights over broken ground. And that is not going to go away. You're still going to want to put your vehicles on tracks to carry across broken ground, and then the whatever combat friction you've got.
Because bogs are going to stop whatever vehicle tries to go through them.
Yeah, and I'd need to see more data on your 8x8 balloon wheeled vehicles and how well they go, but they're still easier to destroy than tracks. And and I don't think, from what I've read and seen talking to people, that they are still up to what tracks can cross.
No. Even, depending on the weather and the waterlogging of the system of the area, even doesn't matter how good your engine tracks and everything else are, you're just going to sink and have to be dragged out.
Tanks can still get bogged. They're not invulnerable in terms of solving the ground pressure problem of extremely heavy vehicles. They go the furthest. Let's move on from the Australian wrote quite a foolish article because they didn't choose to understand things, but that's the Murdoch press for you. TOS 3 has been seen in the wild.
TOS 2 on a TOS 1 with the weather longer range.
So, TOS 1 is the...
flamethrower!
Well, the Russians classified it as a flamethrower for conventional forces in Europe, treaty purposes, but it was basically a thermobaric weapon lobber built on a T-72 chassis. And as such was in many ways the most powerful tank in the world, certainly the most powerful tracked vehicle for its punch. When you see video of TOS bombardment of places in Syria,
but it only has a very short range.
Yeah, you got to be careful that you don't end up in your own fireball, a bit like the Davy Crockett.
It's got a little bit longer than that, but it's pretty similar. And so thermobaric basically means a lot of fire. It sucks all the oxygen in, sets it on fire, and kills everybody in bunkers, trenches, everything else around. So really bad for troops anywhere, not in a sealed room.
And
like
anyone in a bunker as well. But so if you're not familiar with them, sometimes they're called fuel air bombs, sometimes they're called vacuum bombs. But basically, the round lobs in, and as it comes in, sprays a bunch of fuel into the air, and then uses the air as an oxidizer for the explosive, and it can make a very, very big boom and suck a lot of...
so the TOS 1 was on tracked vehicle with a short range missiles. TOS 2 was on
much less interesting because it was on wheels.
Yep. But had a longer range, and it was on wheels and could throw... the Ukrainians took great delight in taking out both of these sort of vehicles because they were horrific vehicles on the attack for the Russians when they were trying to take out troops in bunkers and trenches and so forth. So now the Russians have unveiled that they now built a TOS-3, which is essentially the
It's gone back to tracks. Yeah.
It's gone back to tracks. It's gone, so it's still on an armored chassis. It's got tracks. They've got fewer
rounds.
fewer missiles in there, but they also have inbuilt drone counter.
It's got cope cages built into it.
Cope cages and drone jamming buddy things on it. So when the Ukrainians will see those coming around, well, who knows, and what sort of range it'll have, whether it'll be the short range of the TOS-1 or the longer range of the TOS-2, or even longer range, because it's got fewer missiles involved in it than either of the previous ones. So
now everyone mocked the Russians with their cope cages at the start of the Ukraine war. We did too. It was fun.
They're coming into their own.
Given the if there's sorry, I didn't put them in the slideshow for this bit, but there's pictures in the wild now of M1 Abrams with cope cages fitted. So it seems like it's a good idea. That's quite essential, particularly when you've got little flying bits of high explosive that can be landing at any time. Although I still maintain that clearing those flying annoyances out is going to be something that needs a bit more focus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Task and Purpose did a feature on the Challenger 3, Rob.
That was great.
Yeah, earlier in the month we thought it would be the main thing we were talking about, and then a bunch of other stuff happened. Laserpig's also done a Challenger video recently that was quite good, in that for Laserpig he was quite honest, saying Challenger 3 is probably the last huzzah of British tank production, and for the country that invented the tank, that's quite a thing. And bear in mind, Challenger 3 isn't even a new build. Like, people accuse the TR-85 of being an upgraded, T-55. Challenger 3 is literally an upgraded Challenger 2. They take the old chassis into the factory, they do the upgrades, and they pull them out.
Yeah, but you got to, with the the election coming up in the UK, you got to wonder what sort of reinvigoration the Labor will put into
They're not going
the
to spend
country.
more on defence, though.
They might. They might, because rather than shoveling money into their billionaire mates, they might actually start saying, oh, okay, let's reinvigorate our military and start spending money on the population rather than shoveling money into our billionaires.
Look, it's true that when you stop the looting, it's amazing what you can find more money to do.
It really is. It really is. When you stop shoveling money into the billionaires and actually put it into services and people and things you actually want.
But it's a bit like New Zealand once Jacinda Ardern got in power. Admittedly, they've put a new Conservative government in that's rewinding everything. But, they said, let's end homelessness. Turns out that if you're not letting your billionaires loot the country, you've got money to just build homes for people. It's astonishing. Sorry, we're drifting off the tanks here. Let's get back to them. Yeah,
tanks are always political. That's the side.
That was the last T-shirt. We're on tank destroyers now.
Right.
Okay. The new Leopard. This is going to take a while to unpack. Let's get into. Task and Purpose on the Challenger 3. Just to finish up with it. A video. I like Chris Cappy's videos. They're well worth watching. Worth remembering, Task and Purpose do have a very American defence industry bent. Chris Cappy puts a very human face on it, but it is still military-industrial complex. But they...
and if the military-industrial complex want to throw money at us to push things in it,
we will sell out in a minute.
We're there, baby. We're there.
Come on, give us the money. Or at least take us for a ride in your tanks or something. But yeah, it was... basically Challenger 3 is putting a lot of the latest gear onto a well-proven chassis. And to that extent, yes, it is going to be good for a while. But the future probably is in... The MBTs of today are all very old designs, and the battlefield has changed enormously. And new designs are really going to be needed. Which brings us to...
Which is going to be... It's always going to cost a lot of money because, let's face it, new military things cost a lot of money. You're not getting anything cheap these days. And because the military-industrial complex knows that they can charge 3 times as much as what it's actually worth, and because their job is to benefit shareholders rather than actually achieve anything.
Yeah, it's worth noting though that even today the tank at $5 to $10 million US is a pretty low ticket item in the world of military procurement, and it keeps its operators alive on a high threat environment. Okay, but let's take that and talk about the new Leopard.
Leopard 2 ARC 3.0. All right. Ignore that.
Yeah.
No tanks are rolling in through the doors as we try to take us out.
We don't think so. Okay, so they're saying this is an upgraded Leopard 2, but they are totally new turret. All the crew moves into the body of the tank.
Taking a leaf out of the T-14 book, my thoughts, and have an uncrewed turret, and everybody's safe in the hull, plus lots of anti-drone and missile.
Panzer Armata.
Plus lots of anti-drone and missile stuff built in rather than added on.
Now, one thing I did not like about this at all, that I'm sure they'll have realised is a bad idea, is it's talking about having 2 NLOS missiles built into it, which is the non-line of sight missile. I think it might have been called Penguin at one point in its life, but this was the missile.
Wasn't the Penguin ones the Australian ones? Naval ones?
No. Okay, maybe not Penguin then. Okay, just ignore the Penguin bit. The NLOS missile was a really interesting one. It was supposed to be the main armament of the littoral combat ships that have been a complete disaster for the US.
Yes, I'm sure we'll be buying one of those sometime soon.
Probably not. I think we're avoiding that one. But
I bet we're buying one sometime soon, John.
The interesting point is that NLOS was threatened to basically make the artillery obsolete, and the artillery is a fully formed branch of the US Army, just killed it off. Because the point is that you can just drop a shipping container of NLOS behind your lines, and then have operators out in the front saying that is a target, and then one of the missiles pops out of the shipping container and goes off and eliminates the target.
So it's like an Amazon drone.
Well, except it's a missile. It's a bit faster than an Amazon drone. But you think of it in terms of, Amazon for warfare, in terms of just dispatching an asset and it popping up from somewhere. Now, the idea that we're going to put 2
missiles on demand.
Missiles on demand, yeah.
There you go.
The idea that you should put 2 of them in the tank, I don't think that's a good use of space in the tank, because their range is so great. We're talking, 25 kilometres or so, that you're better off having the shipping container 25 kilometres behind the front.
But having them on
the tank designating it, and boom, off it goes.
But having them on an armoured chassis, having things on an armoured chassis as it's moving forward is always useful, because they're going to be the ones closer to the front than your safe shipping container.
No, I get that, but I still just think that it's
a capability. It's another capability rather than the same capability. But
you get the problem. Anytime you're engaging targets anywhere outside of 2,000 yards, is that can you even see them functionally to identify the target? At that sort of range, they're probably better vehicles than a tank, which might just be a well camouflaged special operator. Going forward and saying that's the coordinates we want to shoot the missile at, and then the missile will acquire its own lock once it gets closer. The infantryman doesn't need to be worrying about that. Anyway, that's just thoughts on this thing. But the big thing is that they're moving the crew fully into the chassis, and automated turret, and possibly 130 millimeter gun, although
possibly 140.
40, seems like overkill.
And if you look at the images of it, it's the 2-stepped turret system, whereby it provides huge gun depression and elevation, because it's much higher in the turret, and where was I going with that? Stop.
Turret. Gun depression.
Having stuff in there. No, I've totally forgotten what I was going on about. I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Then we're going to go fun one.
Okay.
The last 2 days. Russian economic collapse. Banks closing, stopping and running on cash, suspension of the stock market, because they're reacting to further sanctions by the West, announced this week. And let's see what happens next as the West keeps taking one small step after the other to see what will push Putin over the line.
The banking runs, it's an interesting one in the Soviet context. Oh, not the Soviet context, the Russian context, the Putinist context. I don't have the knowing, but I do know that average wages in Russia have actually been climbing quite dramatically because, again,
wartime economy.
The billionaires had to stop looting and started giving something back to the little people.
But
helps.
Seriously, the banks have been shut the last 2 days and the stock market's closed, and so the other one, because there has been peace talks in
Peace
Switzerland.
talks are starting today, tomorrow, around now. Putin put out his ambit claim,
Yeah.
which is basically his war aims at the start of the conflict.
Yeah, Putin demands terms for the Ukrainian peace talks, setting up any negotiations. It's basically he's setting the goal for with the West. If Trump gets in, a la Chamberlain, that'll go well. So it would be nice if those countries condemning the war would stop buying cheap Russian oil to stockpile and propping up the murderous bastards, mainly the USA and Saudi Arabia, two main oil-producing countries in the world, saying that Russian oil's going bloody cheap. Maybe I'll buy some of that.
I hear what you're saying. At the same time, the effect if we stopped the Russian oil entering the world market would be quite calamitous to Western economies. So it's a bit complicated. It's a bit like how the US was a couple of months ago telling Ukraine they weren't allowed to target Russian oil refineries because they did not want to deal with the consequences to the world oil price of that.
I know it's complicated, but it's still the reason why the Russians can afford to do this is because people are buying their cheap oil.
But once again, we're trying to fight a war on the cheap in Ukraine. When I say we, the West is trying to fight a war on the cheap, which is why they haven't given. The US has got thousands of M1s in its stockpiles. Throw them all at the front and see what happens. And all the F-16s in the stockpiles.
They're coming. It's always penny packeting up and saying, okay, if we do this, will this push Putin over the line to? So they're killing him by 1,000 cuts of saying, will this push him into a nuclear exchange?
All they're trying to do is keep the conflict frozen, not accept a defeat. We're going to talk about the aid package that's been announced for Ukraine, which again, most of it's not going to arrive until just before the election. The only thing Washington wants is for Ukraine not to collapse before November. That's kind of the only real thing they're doing. So they're giving them just enough. What we're seeing is obvious that the weapons finally getting to Ukraine has done a lot for killing a lot of Russians, which.
That doesn't include the Abrams, though.
Okay. Yeah. No, but just artillery and particularly the MLRS and the ATACMS
and just artillery rounds.
Artillery rounds, which the other thing that's really interesting is it's a lot of people are saying it's quite clear that the M777, the lightweight howitzer, has proven to not be very useful for Ukrainian use because it's a lightweight howitzer.
And yet, how many have Australia got? And that's our mainstay artillery piece.
But the point is that it's a towed artillery piece that is lightweight. Lightweight artillery. Anytime you hear about lightweight and artillery means it cannot fire for long periods of time.
Right, sustained use. Okay,
it will wear out and break because it's got a lot of aluminium in it. It's great for helicoptering up onto a mountainside. So it can form a fire base, and every now and then when the insurgents pop up their heads, you can drop some death on them. Good for that, but it's not great for an artillery duel with fixed Russian tubes.
Good point, Tasman. Yes, the President Macron of France has offered the Mirage 2000s to Ukraine as well. So, and Argentina, yes.
The Super Etendards from Argentina are ones that aren't in great nick, but might do something. But I don't think Ukraine actually needs more orphan fleets of old things, but they're good planes.
But the fact that Argentina is actually offering them with
that's because it's Javier Milei
that's what I'm saying.
Superhero wannabe nut job.
No, I know. That's the fact that he's actually jumping on board rather than
he's probably going to charge a lot of money for them, but yeah.
I mean, let's see how they go.
Argentina's got a lot of problems right now under Milei's economic operation, and selling whatever gear they've got overseas is probably a good idea. Yes. Only 4. There aren't many. All right, where are we up to now, Rob?
I think that's it.
Okay, well, we haven't even got to the other beer yet.
No, we'll have to live without that.
Oh, okay.
We'll drink that on our own.
We'll drink that on our own. Okay, folks.
And you'll have to guess what it might have been.
Anyway, Staropramen in a can, not as
I'll
good
just give you a little sneaky peek.
Oh. All right, we'll share that on social media. So this has been a relatively short one, but yeah, we're still at 1 hour and 33. That's not too bad.
TR-85. Basically, I feel that Romania tricked their way into NATO and have kept the idea going, saying, look, we don't want to be Ukraine, but we don't want to spend any more money on buying new tanks. So we're just going to just string you along a little bit longer. They're a fairly safe. They're not going to go back to communism anytime soon. We've seen. We're pretty sure of that. They are trying to deal with the corruption that has been built in by the previous Soviet slash Ceausescu rulers. So they have maintained a automobile building industry unlike Australia, and so they can actually build their own vehicles, their own tanks, and whenever they need to. And good on them for doing all that. And let's face it, what do we take away from Romania is having a nice big mountain range full of forests, and they do have the largest virgin forest areas within Europe still, is a really good defensive effort for your country. So plant those trees and stop chopping them down, and grow some mountains is as advice for
trees for national defence.
For any country. Just have a great big forest.
Your infantrymen will thank you when they are hiding behind those trees when the heavy rounds are coming.
I mean, we're seeing in Ukraine, every defensive line is built into a tree line.
Yeah.
All right? So just keep on planting trees, boys and girls, if you want to keep your country safe.
All right. And on that note, we're going to thank you all for joining us. And
thank you.
And head off, and particularly thank everyone on the live stream. Your input's been invaluable.
That's been awesome.
Yep. Always appreciated. And here we go.